Everyone mocked her for accepting that job at the Millionaire's hotel, but no one predicted that she would overcome the challenges and build a beautiful journey. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now, subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The clatter of expensive silverware against fine china filled the air of Montclair, the exclusive Upper East Side restaurant where Emma Williams had been working for nearly 2 years. At 24, she moved with practiced efficiency between tables, her steps quick but never hurried, her smile professional but never too familiar. She had mastered the art of being visible only when needed, a skill that wealthy patrons unconsciously demanded from service staff. "Another bottle of the Bordeaux for table 7, Emma murmured to the sommelier as she passed, mentally calculating the growing bill that would eventually become her tip. Every dollar mattered when night classes in business administration cost what they did. It was a Tuesday evening in April 2008, and the financial district crowd had arrived in full force. Emma balanced a tray of appetizers with one hand, weaving between tables with the grace of a dancer, a necessary skill in a restaurant where tables were positioned to maximize capacity rather than comfort. "Excuse me," a deep voice called as she passed a corner table of suited executives. "Could we get another round?" Emma turned, her professional smile already in place. "Of course, sir. Right away." She took in the table of 5 men in tailored suits, their expressions a mix of satisfaction from the meal and tension from whatever business they were discussing. But it was the man who had spoken who held her attention for a fraction longer than professional courtesy required. Dark hair, jawline that seemed sculpted rather than grown, and eyes that actually looked at her instead of through her. "Thank you," he said, the simple acknowledgement feeling oddly significant in a place where she was typically treated as part of the furniture. Later, as Emma carefully poured wine for the table, her hand slipped almost imperceptibly, sending a single drop of red onto the pristine white tablecloth. "I'm so sorry," she said immediately, reaching for her cloth. While the other executives frowned or continued their conversation as if nothing had happened, the dark-haired man waved dismissively. "Don't worry about it. It's just a drop." She cleaned it anyway, but not before noticing the monogram on his French cuffs, J.M. "Thank you, Mr. Montgomery," he supplied. "Jackson Montgomery." The name registered immediately. The Montgomerys weren't just wealthy, they were New York aristocracy, a family that had literally built portions of the Manhattan skyline. "Thank you, Mr. Montgomery," Emma said, completing her task and moving away. 3 nights later, Jackson Montgomery returned alone, requesting Emma's section specifically. He ordered a simple meal and a glass of wine, but stayed for nearly 2 hours, most of that time spent asking her questions during her brief visits to his table. "Business administration at New York University?" he asked after she mentioned her night classes. "That's impressive while working full-time." Emma shrugged. "Not much choice when you're paying your own way." "What's your focus?" he asked, genuinely interested. "Sustainable business models. I believe small businesses waste enormous resources through inefficient energy usage. I'd like to change that someday." Jackson raised an eyebrow. "That's surprisingly specific." "I've worked in enough small businesses to see the pattern," she replied, then gestured around. "Even this place could cut its energy bill by 30% with the right systems." He studied her with new appreciation. "You know, you think bigger than most executives I know." For the next 2 weeks, Jackson returned regularly, always alone, always requesting Emma's section. Their conversations grew longer, Emma increasingly aware of her manager's disapproving glances as she spent too much time at a single table. On a rainy Friday night as she finished her shift, Emma found Jackson waiting in the lobby, no table reserved. "Ms. Williams," he said, standing as she emerged from changing out of her uniform. "I hope this isn't inappropriate, but I was wondering if you might join me for dinner tomorrow. Somewhere you don't have to serve the food." Emma paused, clutching her worn backpack containing tonight's study materials. He stood there in a suit that probably cost more than her semester's tuition, looking somehow both confident and uncertain. "People like you don't usually date people like me, Mr. Montgomery," she said finally. His smile was unexpected. "And what kind of people are we exactly?" "You know what I mean. You build skyscrapers. I serve drinks in them." "Maybe I find that refreshing," he replied. "Besides, I'd like to hear more about your ideas on sustainable business models without my dinner getting cold." Emma hesitated, weighing the genuine interest she'd seen in his eyes against a lifetime of practical caution. "One dinner," she said finally, "but I pay my own way." He laughed. "We'll negotiate that tomorrow. 7 o'clock? I can send a car?" "I'll meet you there," she interrupted. "Just text me the address." The restaurant Jackson chose overlooked Central Park, its windows offering a glittering panorama of the city. Emma had arrived 30 minutes early, waiting in a coffee shop across the street to gather her courage. She wore her only nice dress, a simple black number she'd bought for job interviews, but still felt conspicuously underdressed as she entered. Jackson stood immediately upon seeing her, waving off the maitre d' who had been eyeing Emma's attire with barely concealed disdain. "You look beautiful," he said simply, pulling out her chair. Throughout dinner, Emma felt the curious glances from neighboring tables, the whispers behind delicate hands. Jackson either didn't notice or chose to ignore them, focusing entirely on their conversation. "My father expects me to run the company exactly as he has for 40 years, he confided over dessert. "But the world is changing. Sustainable development isn't just ethical, it's going to be essential for survival in the market." "That's what I've been saying," Emma leaned forward eagerly. "Look at what's happening in Europe with energy-efficient buildings. They're not just saving money, they're commanding premium prices." Jackson smiled, watching her animated expression. "Most people see me as just another trust fund kid playing with daddy's money." "Are you?" Emma challenged. "I'm trying not to be," he answered honestly. "I want to build something that matters, something that lasts beyond just adding another building to the skyline." After dinner, they walked to a rooftop bar with an unobstructed view of Manhattan's glittering expanse. The spring air was cool but not cold, the city lights creating a private universe for them. "I used to look at buildings like yours from my apartment in the Bronx," Emma said, gazing at the skyline. "I always wondered what it would be like to create something that changed this landscape." Jackson studied her profile, illuminated by the city lights. "You know what I think, Emma Williams? I think you're going to change a lot more than just the landscape." He reached for her hand, his touch warm against the cool night air. "I think you're extraordinary." Emma turned to face him, surprised by the earnestness in his expression. His eyes held none of the calculation or condescension she'd feared, only genuine admiration. "Most people don't see me at all," she said softly. "I see you," he replied, moving closer. "I've been seeing you since that first night at Montclair." When his lips touched hers, the city seemed to fall away entirely. The kiss was gentle at first, then deeper, more certain. Emma felt as if she were standing at the edge of something vast and unknown, terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. As Jackson's lips touched hers and Manhattan glittered below them like an ocean of possibilities, Emma couldn't imagine that in 6 months, that same man would expel her from his life with words cold enough to freeze the most ardent heart. The magic of that first kiss lingered with Emma for days after, an unexpected warmth that colored her usually pragmatic world. For a woman who had planned every step of her adult life with careful calculation, the spontaneity of falling for Jackson Montgomery felt both exhilarating and terrifying. She hadn't planned for this. A whirlwind romance with a man who inhabited a world she glimpsed only through the windows of restaurants where she served. Their second date came just 2 days later, a private tour of the Metropolitan Museum after closing hours. Emma stood transfixed before a Van Gogh, bathed in soft museum lighting. "How did you arrange this?" she whispered, conscious of her voice echoing through the empty galleries. Jackson shrugged, as if private museum tours were commonplace. The Montgomery family has supported the Met for generations. They were happy to accommodate a small request. A small request that would be impossible for anyone without his name, Emma thought, but didn't say. That night established a pattern for the 6 months that followed. Jackson introduced Emma to a world of privilege she had only witnessed from the periphery. Exclusive restaurants where chefs emerged to greet them personally, weekends in the Hamptons at the Montgomery Summer Estate, Broadway shows with backstage access. "You need something for the Pearson fundraiser," Jackson announced one Saturday morning, 3 months into their relationship. He drove them to a boutique on Madison Avenue where staff greeted him by name and offered champagne before they'd even begun browsing. "I can't afford anything here," Emma whispered as a saleswoman presented dresses that cost more than her monthly rent. "Don't worry about it," Jackson replied, selecting an emerald silk gown that complemented her eyes. "Consider it an investment in both our futures." Emma hesitated. "Jackson, I can pay for my own clothes." "Of course you can," he said, kissing her forehead. "But why should you when it makes me happy to see you in beautiful things?" The saleswoman smiled indulgently, and Emma recognized the look, the same one she'd seen on the faces of servers when she'd sat at Jackson's table. It was the look reserved for the temporary girlfriends of wealthy men, a blend of envy and pity because they knew what she was just beginning to suspect, that people like her were novelties, not permanencies, in this world. Still, she accepted the dress, and others that followed. They accumulated in a section of Jackson's closet that he had cleared for her things, a small collection of designer garments that hung beside her waitress uniforms like immigrants in a foreign land. Their first weekend in the Hamptons came in June. The Montgomery estate sprawled across 3 acres of prime beachfront, a white colonial mansion with a separate guest house larger than the apartment Emma shared with 2 roommates in the Bronx. "This has been in my family for 4 generations," Jackson explained as they walked the manicured grounds. "My great-grandfather built it during the Depression." "While everyone else was losing everything," Emma observed. Jackson looked surprised, then thoughtful. "I never considered it that way. The Montgomerys have always been insulated from economic fluctuations." That weekend, Emma met some of Jackson's friends for the first time. Other heirs and heiresses who spoke about vacations in Saint-Tropez and boarding schools in Switzerland as casually as Emma's friends discussed subway delays and overtime shifts. "So, where exactly did you study, Emma?" asked a woman named Cassandra, her smile not reaching her eyes. "NYU. I'm finishing my business degree there now," Emma replied. "Oh, how determined of you," Cassandra said, exchanging glances with another woman. "And your family is in—" "My mom's a nurse in the Bronx. It's just the 2 of us." An uncomfortable silence followed, broken by Jackson returning with drinks. "Emma works harder than anyone I know," he said, putting his arm around her waist. "She's developing fascinating theories on sustainable business models." The conversation shifted to safer topics, but Emma noticed how Jackson steered it away from any mention of their relationship's future. When someone asked if they'd be at the Montgomery Labor Day gathering, Jackson deftly changed the subject to a new restaurant opening. Later that night, alone in the guest house, Emma asked, "Why haven't I met your parents yet?" "We've been together almost 4 months." Jackson tensed slightly. "My father is difficult at best. He has expectations about who I should be with." "Someone not like me," Emma concluded. "Someone boring," Jackson corrected, kissing her. "Someone predictable who'd never challenge the Montgomery way of doing things. You're much more interesting." The answer satisfied her temporarily, but the question lingered as summer progressed and no family introduction materialized. In July, at his luxury Fifth Avenue apartment overlooking Central Park, Jackson watched Emma cook a simple pasta dish her mother had taught her. "This smells amazing," he said, though she noticed he barely touched it at dinner, suggesting they order from his favorite Italian restaurant the next night. It was in small moments like these that Emma began noticing the fissures in their seemingly perfect romance. The way Jackson would suggest she soften her Bronx accent when attending functions with his colleagues, his gentle corrections of her table manners, the subtle reshaping he attempted under the guise of helping her fit into his world. "Just a suggestion," he said one evening, after recommending she use different phrases in professional settings. "It'll make things easier in certain circles." Emma found herself practicing pronunciation in the bathroom mirror of his apartment, feeling simultaneously grateful for his guidance and diminished by the need for it. She was becoming fluent in a foreign language called privilege, but the lessons often left her tongue-tied and uncertain. Still, there were moments of genuine connection that made the discomfort worthwhile. Late one night, wrapped in Egyptian cotton sheets in his bedroom, Jackson confessed his deepest fear. "I'm terrified of becoming my father," he whispered into the darkness. Cold, calculating, seeing people as either assets or liabilities. Emma stroked his hair. "You're not like that." "I could be," he said. "The Montgomery name comes with shadows, Emma. Sometimes I wonder if I'll ever escape them." In these vulnerable moments, Emma glimpsed the man beneath the polished exterior, someone struggling against the gravitational pull of wealth and expectation, someone who saw in her a different path. It was this Jackson she fell in love with, not the one who took her to charity galas where she was displayed like an exotic acquisition. By September, Emma had gradually established a small presence in Jackson's apartment. A toothbrush, then nightclothes, then casual outfits, until he finally cleared a section of his massive walk-in closet. "For your things," he said. "It's ridiculous for you to keep going back to the Bronx when you spend most nights here anyway." Emma interpreted this as progress, a step toward permanence, though she maintained her shared apartment as a safety net. They never explicitly discussed the future, with Jackson preferring to enjoy the moment without complications. Emma, trained by a lifetime of pragmatism, recognized the warning in his vagueness, but chose to ignore it. The first sign of trouble came in early October when Emma began experiencing morning nausea she attributed to stress from final exams. After a week of waking up ill, she visited her doctor for what she assumed was a stomach virus. "When was your last period, Ms. Williams?" the doctor asked, reviewing her chart. Emma calculated and felt a cold wave of realization wash over her. She was never irregular, and now she was 2 weeks late. "Let's run some tests," the doctor suggested gently. The following evening, alone in her Bronx apartment rather than Jackson's penthouse, Emma sat on the edge of her bathtub, staring at the pregnancy test in her hands. She had bought 2, unwilling to trust a single result for something so momentous. Both displayed 2 pink lines. Emma remained frozen, mind racing through calculations and possibilities. They had been careful mostly, except for that night in Montauk, when passion overcame precaution on the private beach behind the guest house. One night, one oversight in 6 months of relationship. She placed a protective hand over her still flat stomach, emotions swirling between terror and an unexpected tenderness. This wasn't part of her careful plan. A baby now, before her degree was complete, before her career had started. Yet beneath the practical concerns stirred something else. The possibility of family, of permanence, of Jackson and her creating something lasting together. As she stared at the 2 pink lines on the pregnancy test, Emma felt a mixture of terror and joy, without knowing that this small symbol of life growing inside her would become both her greatest blessing and the catalyst for the cruelest rejection she would ever experience. Emma stared at the 2 pink lines for what felt like hours, emotions swirling like a tempest inside her. The unexpectedness of the pregnancy collided with a strange, fierce protectiveness she already felt for the life growing within her. After 3 more days of processing the news, cycling through denial, panic, and tentative acceptance, she finally decided it was time to tell Jackson. She chose a Wednesday evening for the conversation, knowing he'd be home celebrating his latest acquisition, a commercial building in the financial district that had been the focus of his attention for months. Emma spent extra time preparing for the night, selecting a simple blue dress that brought out her eyes, rehearsing her words in the mirror of her Bronx apartment. "We're having a baby," she practiced, then shook her head. Too blunt. "I have wonderful news," she tried again. Too presumptuous. "Jackson, I'm pregnant," she finally settled on, direct but neutral, leaving space for his reaction without coloring it with her own uncertainty. The taxi ride to his Fifth Avenue penthouse felt interminable. Emma's hand rested protectively over her still flat stomach as she gazed out at the city lights, imagining a future where their child would grow up with opportunities she never had. Perhaps this unexpected development would accelerate what had been slowly building between them. Perhaps this was the universe's way of cementing their unlikely union. When she arrived, Jackson was in high spirits, opening a bottle of Dom Perignon in the kitchen of his expansive penthouse. "There she is," he called out, his voice buoyant with success. "Come celebrate with me. The Madison Avenue property is officially ours." Emma smiled nervously, setting her purse down on the marble countertop. "Congratulations. I know how much this deal meant to you." Jackson poured 2 flutes of champagne, extending one toward her. "To the future of Montgomery Properties, boldly expanding while our competitors retreat." Emma accepted the glass but didn't drink, watching Jackson take a deep swallow of the expensive champagne. The light from the chandelier caught the liquid, turning it golden, like everything in Jackson's world. "Is something wrong?" he asked, noting her hesitation. "This is the good stuff, not the champagne we serve at corporate functions." Emma set the untouched glass down. "Jackson, I need to tell you something." His celebratory smile faltered slightly, a businessman's wariness instantly replacing casual joy. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant," she said, the words hanging in the air between them like suspended crystal. The silence that followed was absolute. Jackson's hand, still holding his champagne flute, froze midway to his lips. His expression transformed so completely that Emma felt as though she were watching a time-lapse of ice forming over warm water. "That's impossible," he finally said, his voice flat. "We've been careful." "Not always," Emma replied, her hand instinctively moving to her abdomen. "Remember that night in Montauk?" Recognition flashed across his face, followed quickly by calculation, the same expression he wore when assessing property values or negotiating contracts. "How far along?" he asked clinically. "About 6 weeks." Jackson set his glass down with deliberate precision on the marble countertop. His movements were controlled, mechanical, as he walked to his desk and pulled open the top drawer. "How much do you want?" he asked, his back to her. Emma blinked, not comprehending. "What?" "To take care of this discreetly." He turned, checkbook in hand. "How much?" The question hit Emma like a physical blow. She took an involuntary step backward. "I don't want money to take care of anything, Jackson. I'm telling you we're going to have a child." Something dark and unfamiliar crossed his features. Then, unexpectedly, he laughed, a sound devoid of warmth, closer to contempt than amusement. "Emma," he said, her name suddenly sounding foreign on his lips. "Let's be realistic about this situation." "Realistic," she repeated, the word hollow. "Yes, realistic." Jackson leaned against his desk, studying her as if she were a contract with unfavorable terms. "You're a waitress from the Bronx. I'm a Montgomery. My family built half of Manhattan. What exactly did you think would happen here?" Emma struggled to process the transformation happening before her eyes, the man she'd shared intimacies with for 6 months suddenly regarding her as a stranger, an inconvenience. "I thought," she began, her voice surprisingly steady, "that we would discuss this like 2 adults who care about each other." "Care about each other," Jackson echoed, the words empty of meaning. "Emma, you've been diverting, exotic even, but frankly, you're predictable. Common." Each word sliced deeper than the last. Emma stood paralyzed, watching the man she loved transform into someone unrecognizable. People like you," he continued, his voice chillingly calm, "are merely stepping stones for men like me. You're never going to be enough for our world." Tears threatened, but Emma refused to let them fall. "Our world," she repeated. "And what world is that, Jackson? The one where you pretend to care about sustainable development while living in empty excess? The one where you talked about not becoming your father while embodying his worst qualities?" A flicker of something, perhaps shame, crossed his face before the mask of indifference returned. Jackson turned back to his checkbook, writing with practiced efficiency before tearing out the check and sliding it across the counter toward her. "This should cover any procedure and a new start somewhere else. Away from here. Away from me." Emma stared at the check without touching it. "I'm not aborting our child." "Then that's your choice," Jackson replied coldly, "but don't come crawling back later asking for anything." He walked briskly to his bedroom, leaving Emma standing alone in the kitchen. Minutes later, he returned with a small suitcase containing the few possessions she'd accumulated in his apartment over their months together. "My driver is downstairs," he stated, placing the suitcase by the elevator. "You have 10 minutes. "Jackson," Emma said, finding her voice despite the constriction in her throat. "Is this really who you are?" He checked his watch, ignoring her question. 9 minutes now. Emma picked up the check from the counter, finally looking at the amount, $25,000. The price Jackson Montgomery placed on his inconvenience, on their unborn child's existence, on whatever they had shared for 6 months. With trembling fingers, she folded the check and placed it in her purse, then collected her suitcase. Jackson didn't move to help her, didn't offer a final word or glance as she entered the elevator. His last act was pressing the button marked "Service Exit" rather than the main lobby. The descent was excruciating. When the doors opened to the service area, Jackson's driver stood waiting, his expression professionally blank, though his eyes held uncomfortable recognition. He had driven Emma to theater performances, to weekend getaways, always with warm greetings. Now he avoided her gaze as he escorted her to the waiting car. The rain had started sometime during the confrontation upstairs, now falling in heavy sheets that matched Emma's internal landscape. Through the car's tinted windows, Manhattan's lights blurred into watery smears as they drove toward the Bronx. Upon reaching her apartment building, Emma discovered a final blow. Her roommate had assumed she'd moved out permanently and had already replaced her with another tenant. Her remaining belongings sat in boxes in the building's storage room, a note taped to the top with her roommate's apologies and the return of her security deposit. The driver helped her carry the boxes to the car, his discomfort palpable. "Where to now, Miss Williams?" he asked, the formality a stark contrast to the friendly relationship they'd developed over months. Emma sat in the back seat, a woman suddenly homeless, pregnant, and discarded, trying to think clearly through the fog of shock. She gave him the address of a budget hotel in Queens, calculating how long the money from Jackson, money she had taken despite her revulsion, would last while she found her footing again. As the car pulled away from the curb, Emma finally allowed the tears to come, silent streams that matched the rain sliding down the windows, obscuring the city that had promised so much and delivered so little. Sitting on a park bench that night, her possessions in 2 suitcases beside her, a protective hand resting on her still imperceptible womb, Emma made a silent promise to her child and herself. One day, Jackson Montgomery would look at her not with disdain, but with the bitter recognition of everything he had thrown away. The modest hotel room in Queens became Emma's home for the first week after Jackson's rejection. Every morning she woke to the same beige walls, the same lumpy mattress, and the same crushing reality. She was 24, pregnant, and completely alone. The $25,000 that had felt like an insult now represented her lifeline, a temporary buffer between her and complete destitution. On her 8th day in Queens, Emma found a tiny studio apartment in a weathered building with unreliable heating but a surprisingly clean bathroom. The landlord, An elderly woman with suspicious eyes softened slightly at Emma's careful appearance and prompt payment of 3 months' rent in advance. "No parties, no drugs, no men staying overnight," the woman instructed, handing over the keys. "That won't be a problem," Emma replied, unconsciously placing a hand on her still flat stomach. The apartment was barely 500 square feet, a kitchenette along one wall, a bathroom so small she could brush her teeth while showering, and a main room that would serve as bedroom, living room, and office. Emma unpacked her meager belongings, carefully hanging the designer clothes Jackson had bought her in the shallow closet, uncertain why she kept them but unable to discard these remnants of another life. Her first priority was finding work. Emma updated her resume, highlighting her business coursework and administrative skills rather than her experience as a waitress. With cautious optimism, she began applying for entry-level positions at companies around the city. The rejections came swiftly and mercilessly. "We're looking for someone with more experience," said the HR representative at a marketing firm. "We need a longer-term commitment," explained another, eyes briefly flicking to Emma's midsection as if he could already see the pregnancy that was still invisible to most. After the 10th interview ended with a vague promise to keep her resume on file, Emma sat on a bench in Bryant Park, reality settling on her shoulders like a physical weight. Professional positions weren't going to materialize for a pregnant woman without connections, regardless of her qualifications. 2 days later, Emma began working as a cashier at a neighborhood grocery store 6 blocks from her apartment. The manager, a harried man named Tony, hired her on the spot. Hours are 8 to 5 Monday through Saturday. No benefits for the first 90 days. Pay is minimum wage plus 50 cents. Take it or leave it. Emma took it. The job was mind-numbing and physically taxing. Standing for 9 hours strained her back and swelled her ankles. Customers were often impatient, and Tony watched the registers like a hawk, quick to point out even minor errors. At night, after her shift ended, Emma would return to her apartment, eat a simple dinner, and begin her second job, data entry for a medical transcription service she found online. The work paid by the document, amounting to barely $8 an hour, but she could do it from home at her own pace. Between these 2 jobs and her dwindling savings, Emma managed to continue her business classes. She arrived at evening lectures exhausted, often fighting waves of pregnancy-induced nausea, but refused to drop out so close to completion. While other students discussed internship opportunities at prestigious firms, Emma quietly took notes, increasingly aware of the widening gap between her circumstances and her ambitions. One particularly difficult evening, after working a double shift to cover for a sick coworker, Emma found herself staring at her reflection in the cracked bathroom mirror. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her complexion had lost its healthy glow. For a moment, Jackson's cruel words echoed in her mind. "People like you are merely stepping stones for men like me." Emma looked directly into her own tired eyes. "He's wrong about everything," she whispered fiercely. "About me. About you." Her hand moved protectively over the subtle curve that had begun to form below her navel. "We're not stepping stones. We're the entire staircase." The following week brought her first prenatal appointment at a public clinic in Queens. Emma sat in the crowded waiting room surrounded by women in various stages of pregnancy, most accompanied by partners or family members. The emptiness of the chair beside her felt conspicuous. The ultrasound technician was briskly professional, spreading cold gel across Emma's abdomen. "Do you want to know the sex?" she asked, eyes on the monitor. Emma nodded, suddenly overwhelmed by the grainy image on the screen, a tiny being with a rapidly fluttering heart. "It's a boy," the technician said, pointing to the screen. "Looks healthy, strong heartbeat. A boy, her son." The word resonated through Emma's body, making the abstract idea of pregnancy suddenly, vividly real. Tears slid silently down her cheeks as she stared at the monitor, memorizing every detail of the tiny figure that represented her future. In the waiting room after her appointment, Emma found herself seated next to an elderly Asian woman who was thumbing through a magazine. The woman looked up, offering a gentle smile. "First pregnancy?" she asked, noting Emma's red-rimmed eyes. Emma nodded, surprised by the stranger's warmth. "Where is your husband, dear?" The woman continued, glancing at the empty seats nearby. The question wasn't judgmental, merely curious, but it pierced Emma's carefully maintained composure. Before she could stop herself, she was telling this stranger a condensed version of her story: the relationship, the rejection, the struggle to stay afloat. The woman listened attentively, her expression softening with each detail. "My name is Mei Chen," she said when Emma finished. "I'm waiting for my daughter. Her third baby is coming next month." "Congratulations," Emma offered, wiping away a stray tear. "You are very brave," Mei said, patting Emma's hand. "But no one should face this alone. Do you have family nearby?" "My mother died 3 years ago. It's just me now." Mei considered this, then reached into her purse and extracted a business card. "I own a small laundry business in your neighborhood. We need help with customer service and bookkeeping. The hours are flexible and," she added with a knowing smile, "babies are welcome." Emma stared at the card. Chen Family Laundry Services. "Why would you offer me a job? You don't even know me." "I know enough," Mei replied simply, "and family takes care of family." The following day, Emma visited the laundry. It was a modest operation, clean and well-organized, with several industrial washing machines humming steadily. Mei greeted her warmly, showing her the small office where customer records were kept, stacks of handwritten cards and receipts in an outdated filing system. "We've been doing everything by hand for 20 years, Mei explained. "My son-in-law says we should computerize, but we never found the right person to help." Emma studied the chaotic system, immediately identifying inefficiencies. "You could save hours each week with a simple database," she suggested tentatively, "and a scheduling system for pickups and deliveries would optimize your staff's time." Mei's eyes twinkled. "See? The right person." Within weeks, Emma had transformed the laundry's administrative systems, creating digital records and implementing a basic scheduling program that reduced missed appointments by 30%. The work wasn't glamorous, but Mei's kindness and the flexible hours made it sustainable as her pregnancy progressed. One afternoon, while organizing receipts, Emma noticed a flyer on the community bulletin board near the laundry's entrance. "Tech Entrepreneurs Program, Building Tomorrow's Innovations Today," the headline proclaimed. It was a 6-month intensive training program offered by a nonprofit in Brooklyn, designed to help underrepresented groups enter the technology sector. That night, Emma spread her finances across her small kitchen table, calculating and recalculating. The program cost $5,000, a significant portion of what remained from Jackson's check. Her practical side argued for saving the money for the baby's arrival, for the uncertain months of early parenthood. The next day, Emma mentioned the program to Mei while they balanced the week's accounts. "It sounds perfect for you," Mei said, examining the flyer Emma had brought. "Your mind works like a computer already, organizing, solving problems." "It's expensive," Emma admitted. "And with the baby coming?" Mei considered this, her wise eyes studying Emma's face. "Sometimes the greatest risk is taking no risk at all," she said finally. "This baby will need more than just food and shelter. He will need to see his mother reaching for her dreams, showing him what's possible." As she filled out the application form for the program that would change her life, Emma couldn't imagine that her unborn son would inspire a technological innovation that would one day make the Montgomery Empire beg for a partnership. The entrepreneurship program became Emma's sanctuary, a place where her ideas flourished despite her expanding waistline. Each evening after leaving Chen Family Laundry, she would take the subway to Brooklyn, one hand steadying herself against the train's jerky movements, the other protectively cradling her growing belly. The classrooms smelled of coffee and ambition, filled with dreamers from backgrounds as varied as their business concepts. Emma's software concept consistently drew the most questions during presentations, her practical approach to energy efficiency standing out among more theoretical ventures. Most sustainable tech aims at large corporations, she explained to her cohort one evening, now visibly 7 months pregnant. But small businesses collectively waste millions through inefficient systems they can't afford to upgrade. My software provides affordable optimization without expensive hardware changes. As August approached, Emma's preparations intensified on multiple fronts. Her tiny apartment gradually accumulated second-hand baby items, a crib from a church donation program, clothes from a community exchange, and a rocking chair May insisted on purchasing despite Emma's protests. Meanwhile, her business plan grew more robust, incorporating feedback from instructors and potential users. On the morning of August 12th, Emma awoke to sharp contractions. Too early, she thought immediately, counting backward. 38 weeks, close enough to full term but still unexpected. She called May with shaking hands. "It's starting," she said simply when the older woman answered. "I'm coming," May replied without hesitation. "Don't move." Emma packed her modest hospital bag between contractions, the pain intensifying with alarming speed. By the time May arrived 20 minutes later, Emma was hunched over, breathing through gritted teeth. The taxi ride to Queen's General Hospital blurred into a haze of pain and anxiety. At the admissions desk, a nurse looked up from her paperwork with practiced efficiency. "Father of the baby?" she asked, pen poised over the form. "Not involved," Emma managed between contractions. The nurse's expression softened slightly. "Emergency contact?" Before Emma could answer, May stepped forward. "I am her family." The delivery room was blindingly bright and impersonal. Emma lay on the narrow bed, monitors beeping rhythmically while strangers in scrubs examined her most intimate parts with clinical detachment. The contractions built to unbearable peaks, her body working with primal determination despite her exhaustion. "I can't," she gasped after hours of labor, tears streaming down her face. "You can," May insisted, wiping Emma's forehead with a cool cloth. "You are stronger than you know." After 18 hours of labor, Noah Williams entered the world with a defiant cry at 2:17 a.m. on August 13, 2009. 7 pounds, 3 ounces of perfect new life with a shock of dark hair and eyes that, even through the blur of newborn unfocus, seemed to contain the same intensity Emma had once found captivating in his father. When the nurse placed Noah on Emma's chest, the universe momentarily contracted to this single point of connection, skin against skin, heart against heart. Through tears of exhaustion and wonder, Emma studied her son's features, tracing the slope of his nose, the curve of his tiny ear. "Hello, Noah," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "I've been waiting for you." Later, when Noah slept in the hospital bassinet beside her bed and May had gone home to rest, Emma watched the first light of dawn filter through the thin curtains. In the quiet solemnity of early morning, she made a promise to her sleeping son. "One day, my boy, we will return. And when we do, it won't be to beg, but to show the world what he threw away." The reality of single motherhood hit with the force of a hurricane. Noah was colicky, screaming through most nights as Emma paced her tiny apartment, bouncing and shushing with increasing desperation. Sleep became a luxury, snatched in 30-minute increments between feedings and crying jags. Her body, still recovering from childbirth, ached constantly. The laundry job, generous as May was with scheduling, barely covered essentials after rent. "You must rest," May insisted when she found Emma nodding off while entering customer data, Noah fussing in the second-hand bouncer beside the desk. "I can't afford to," Emma replied, fighting to keep her eyes open. "The program's final presentation is in 3 weeks, and I haven't finished my prototype." The entrepreneurship program had continued despite Noah's arrival, with Emma bringing him to classes wrapped against her chest. Most instructors were accommodating, though Emma noticed the subtle shift in how some viewed her prospects. motherhood creating an invisible barrier between her and their expectations of success. Nights became an impossible equation, Noah requiring constant attention, her coursework demanding focus she couldn't summon, her body begging for rest she couldn't grant. More than once, Emma found herself crying alongside her son at 3 a.m, overwhelmed by the enormity of what she'd undertaken. Yet somehow, she persisted. The prototype of her energy optimization software gradually took shape during Noah's brief naps and late-night coding sessions. May became an invaluable presence, often taking Noah for a few hours so Emma could attend classes or work uninterrupted. "He likes the sound of the washing machines," May explained, showing Emma how she'd set up a small bassinet in the laundry's back office. "Sleeps better here than anywhere else." It became their arrangement, Noah spending mornings in the laundry with May while Emma attended classes, then joining his mother for afternoon shifts as she implemented her software in the very business that had become their support system. The results were immediate and impressive. The scheduling system Emma created reduced appointment conflicts by 40%. The new inventory management program identified precisely when supplies needed reordering. Most significantly, her energy optimization settings for the industrial washers and dryers reduced electricity consumption by nearly 30%. "My son-in-law won't believe these numbers," May said, reviewing the first month's utility bill after implementation. "How did you make these old machines so efficient with just a computer program?" "It's about patterns," Emma explained, Noah sleeping against her chest in a carrier. "The software identifies optimal running times, load distributions, and maintenance needs. The machines were always capable of this efficiency. They just needed the right instructions." On a cool October afternoon, May's daughter Lisa visited the laundry with her husband, David Chen. Emma had heard much about David, a successful tech entrepreneur who had made his fortune developing security software for financial institutions. She had expected someone intimidating, perhaps reminiscent of Jackson's polished arrogance. Instead, she met a thoughtful man in his late 30s, dressed in a simple button-down shirt and jeans, who greeted every employee by name before turning his attention to the new systems. "My mother-in-law says you've revolutionized operations here," he said, examining the interface Emma had created on the laundry's ancient desktop computer. "That's an overstatement," Emma replied, adjusting Noah, who had begun to fuss. "I just implemented some basic efficiency protocols." David raised an eyebrow, studying the screen more carefully. "Basic? You've created a proprietary algorithm for energy consumption prediction. That's hardly basic." He turned toward her, noticing Noah fully for the first time. His expression softened. "How old?" "2 months," Emma answered, gently patting Noah's back to soothe him. David watched her quiet the baby with practiced movements while simultaneously explaining complex software features. "And you developed this while pregnant and caring for a newborn?" Something in his tone, not pity but genuine respect, made Emma stand straighter. "Yes." David continued exploring the system, asking increasingly technical questions that Emma answered with growing confidence. Finally, he leaned back from the computer. "May I see your complete business plan? The one from your entrepreneurship program?" Surprised, Emma retrieved her laptop from the office, pulling up the document while balancing Noah in one arm. David read silently, occasionally nodding or making small sounds of approval. "Your market analysis is spot on," he said eventually. "Small businesses lose billions collectively through energy inefficiency, but your scope is too limited." "Limited?" Emma asked, slightly defensive. "This could scale well beyond laundromats," David explained, excitement evident in his voice. "Restaurants, retail, small manufacturing, any business with significant energy consumption could benefit." He closed the laptop, regarding Emma with newfound intensity. "I'd like to invest in you. Not just in this idea, but in your vision." Emma blinked, certain she'd misheard. "Invest?" David nodded, already pulling out his phone to make calculations. $50,000 initial funding, enough to hire 2 programmers, rent a small office space, and provide you with a livable salary while you develop a full commercial version. Noah began crying in earnest then, hungry and tired of being held while adults talked business. As Emma shifted him to her other shoulder, trying to process David's offer, she caught sight of herself in the laundry's window reflection. Exhausted, hair hastily pulled back, wearing clothes chosen for practicality rather than appearance, holding a fussing infant while discussing venture capital. Not exactly the image of a tech entrepreneur about to receive her first investment. David seemed to read her thoughts. "I'm not investing despite your circumstances, Ms. Williams. I'm investing because of them. Anyone who can create this level of innovation while navigating single parenthood has exactly the determination and problem-solving abilities I look for in founders." The check for $50,000 that David Chen handed Emma that afternoon in the laundry seemed like a fortune to the young mother. Little did she know it would be just the first step toward building a billion-dollar empire that would one day make the Montgomery name seem small in comparison. The $50,000 check felt impossibly heavy in Emma's hands. She stared at it long after David Chen had left the laundromat, her mind racing with possibilities that had seemed unreachable just hours before. Noah slept against her chest, oblivious to the moment that would reshape both their futures. "You should deposit this immediately," May advised, gently touching Emma's shoulder, "before it flies away." 3 weeks later, Emma stood in the doorway of a small office space in Brooklyn. Sunlight streamed through dusty windows, illuminating bare walls and empty desks. A stack of moving boxes waited to be unpacked, containing the modest beginnings of Ascension Technologies, the name she'd chosen to represent both her personal journey and her company's mission to elevate small businesses through technology. "What do you think?" she asked Noah, who watched from his carrier with wide, curious eyes. At 4 months old, he had already developed an intense gaze that seemed to absorb everything around him. "I think he approves," came a voice from behind her. David Chen stood in the doorway, carrying a plant in one hand and a bag of takeout in the other. "Every new office needs 2 things, something green and a proper first meal." Emma smiled, relaxing slightly in David's presence. Over the past weeks, as they'd formalized their investment agreement, she'd come to appreciate his straightforward approach and genuine interest in her vision. Unlike Jackson, whose attention had always felt like a spotlight that might shift away at any moment, David's support seemed steady and unassuming. The first months were a blur of 18-hour days and impossible challenges. Emma hired 2 recent computer science graduates, both women who had faced their own obstacles in the tech industry, and together they began building the commercial version of her energy optimization software. Noah became a fixture in the office, first in his carrier, then in a playpen beside Emma's desk, his developmental milestones marked against the company's progress. "He rolled over the same day we debugged the scheduling module," Emma noted one evening as David stopped by with dinner, finding her asleep at her keyboard with Noah dozing in the playpen. David had become a regular presence, initially visiting to check on his investment but increasingly staying to help with Noah or offer business advice. He taught Emma the intricacies of startup financing, investor relations, and market positioning, while she impressed him with her intuitive understanding of user experience and practical applications. "Most tech founders get lost in theoretical elegance," he told her after she demonstrated an early version of the software to a group of local restaurant owners who immediately signed up for the beta test. "You see technology through the eyes of the people who'll actually use it." 6 months after receiving David's investment, Ascension Technologies landed its first significant client, a chain of 20 local restaurants struggling with rising energy costs. The impact was immediate and measurable, a 25% reduction in energy consumption across all locations, saving the owners over $60,000 annually. Word spread quickly among small business owners. As summer approached, Emma found herself hiring 2 more programmers and moving to a larger office space. Noah, now crawling with determined energy, explored every corner of the new environment, staff members taking turns keeping him entertained when Emma was in meetings. It was during this period that Emma began to notice a shift in her relationship with David. His visits extended beyond business discussions, and he often arrived with toys or books for Noah. The first time he sat on the floor of the office, patiently showing the baby how to stack blocks, Emma felt something crack in the protective wall she'd built around her heart. One evening in June, after most employees had gone home, David found Emma staring at revenue projections with Noah asleep in a portable crib nearby. "You've increased client acquisition by 40% this quarter," he noted, studying the charts over her shoulder. "Not enough," Emma replied, rubbing her tired eyes. "We need to scale faster if we want to break even by next year." David gently closed her laptop. "You need to rest. When was the last time you saw daylight that wasn't through an office window?" Before Emma could protest, he continued, "There's a new restaurant in Brooklyn Bridge Park. Great views, outdoor seating. Have dinner with me tomorrow?" Emma looked up sharply. "Is this a business dinner or something else?" David held her gaze steadily. Definitely something else. The question hung between them, weighted with possibilities and complications. Emma glanced at Noah, sleeping peacefully, then back at David. "I come with significant baggage," she said finally, gesturing toward her son. "I don't consider him baggage," David replied simply. "I consider him part of the package." Their first date was nothing like the opulent displays Jackson had orchestrated. Instead of exclusive reservations and champagne, they shared wood-fired pizza at a riverside table while watching the sunset paint Brooklyn Bridge in gold. David listened as Emma spoke about her childhood in the Bronx, her mother's struggle as a single parent, her own determination to create a different path for Noah. When he walked her home, their first kiss was gentle, tentative, nothing like the passionate but ultimately hollow embraces she had shared with Jackson. David Chen kissed like a man who understood the value of patience, who recognized that Emma's trust would be earned gradually rather than claimed in a single moment. Their relationship evolved with the same measured pace as Emma's business. Through the summer and into fall, David became a steady presence in their lives, helping Noah take his first steps, celebrating when Ascension signed its 50th client, holding Emma when she finally broke down from exhaustion after 3 days of working through a critical software bug. Still, Emma maintained her emotional distance, waking sometimes from nightmares where Jackson's cold dismissal replayed in excruciating detail. On those nights, she would check on Noah, then sit alone in her kitchen, reminding herself that not all men were the same, that David had shown nothing but respect and genuine affection. The breakthrough came on a rainy October night. David had come over for dinner, now a regular occurrence, and was reading a picture book to Noah when the toddler fell asleep against his chest. As David continued reading in a whisper, seemingly content to serve as a human pillow, Emma felt the last of her resistance dissolve. Later that night, after Noah had been transferred to his crib, Emma finally told David the complete truth about Jackson. Not just the abandonment, but the cruelty of his dismissal, the way he had reduced her to a convenient stepping stone in his life. "He said people like me would never be enough for his world," she confessed, tears falling freely for the first time since that night in the penthouse. "That I was common, predictable." David listened without interruption, his expression growing increasingly somber. When she finished, he took her hands in his. "He was spectacularly wrong," David said firmly, "and someday he'll realize exactly what he threw away." 3 months later, as they walked through Prospect Park on a snowy Sunday afternoon, Noah bundled between them in his stroller, David stopped beneath a frost-covered oak tree. "I want to build a life with you both," he said without preamble. "To be a father to Noah, a partner to you, to create something lasting together." Emma studied his face, honest, kind, without pretense or calculation, and realized she had been waiting for the other shoe to drop, for him to reveal the same hollow core that Jackson had eventually exposed. "I love you," she said simply. both of us do." They married the following spring in a small ceremony at Chen Family Laundry, transformed for the occasion with strings of white lights and potted cherry blossoms. May served as matron of honor, beaming with pride as Emma, wearing a simple ivory sheath, exchanged vows with the man who had seen her potential when she was at her most vulnerable. Noah, now walking confidently and babbling a mix of English and the Mandarin phrases May had taught him, served as ring-bearer, carrying a small pillow with determined concentration. 2 months after the wedding, David formally adopted Noah, though Emma made sure her son understood his origins. "David chose to be your daddy because he loves us both," she explained to the toddler, who was more interested in his toy cars than in complex family dynamics. "He picked us to be his family." As Ascension Technologies continued its steady growth, Emma found herself facing an unexpected challenge when an opportunity arose to bid on an energy efficiency contract for Apex Buildings, a direct competitor to Montgomery Properties. The potential contract would be their largest yet, a significant milestone for the company. Emma hesitated briefly, aware of the connection to her past, then submitted the proposal with confident determination. When Ascension won the contract over 3 established competitors, the industry took notice. A small write-up appeared in a business journal. "Female-led startup revolutionizes energy efficiency for Apex Buildings, challenging traditional market leaders." At the celebration party after signing the contract, David lifted Noah onto his shoulders while employees applauded around them. Emma watched her son laugh, secure in the love of the man who had chosen to be his father, surrounded by the team she had built from nothing. At the celebration party for the new contract, while David raised Noah onto his shoulders and employees applauded, Emma couldn't imagine that in just a decade the Ascension Technologies would be valued in billions, attracting the attention of those who once considered her invisible, including Jackson Montgomery. The morning after the Apex contract celebration, Emma awoke to find Noah nestled between her and David, his small hand resting trustingly on her arm. This single moment, her son secure, her business thriving, her heart finally healing, felt like a victory more profound than any business achievement. "We should get our own place," David whispered, careful not to wake Noah. "Something with more space for him to run around." Within 6 months, that suggestion manifested as a spacious office occupying an entire floor in a renovated industrial building in downtown Brooklyn. Ascension Technologies had grown to 20 employees, each workstation humming with activity as programmers refined algorithms and sales representatives pursued new clients. "Mom, look what I did!" 8-year-old Noah called from the conference room where he'd covered the whiteboard with equations that would baffle most adults. His dark hair fell across his forehead as he pointed excitedly to his work. Emma paused in the doorway, momentarily startled by how much he resembled Jackson in profile. The similarity had grown more pronounced as Noah aged, though his personality, thoughtful, kind, intensely curious, reflected the values she and David had nurtured. "That's incredible, sweetheart," she said, examining the complex mathematical patterns he'd created. "Can you explain what it means?" Noah launched into an explanation of efficiency algorithms, his vocabulary far beyond his years. As he spoke, Emma noticed several programmers gathering in the hallway, listening with undisguised amazement. "He's corrected the variable calculation in the cooling module," one whispered to another. "I've been working on that for weeks." The revelation of Noah's extraordinary mathematical gifts had come gradually. What began as an unusual facility with numbers developed into a genuine talent for complex systems thinking. By age 7, he was solving high school algebra problems. By 8, he was informally contributing to Ascension's programming team. "He's a prodigy," David said one night after watching Noah intuitively redesign a distribution algorithm. "We need to make sure he's challenged academically." The specialized education they arranged, a combination of private tutoring and advanced placement classes, was made possible by Ascension's remarkable growth. The company that had begun in a tiny Brooklyn office now occupied 3 floors and employed over 200 people across development, sales, and implementation teams. Emma's original software had evolved from a simple energy optimization tool into a comprehensive system that could integrate with virtually any industrial equipment. Major manufacturing companies had begun approaching Ascension, drawn by case studies showing 40 to 60% reductions in energy consumption without significant hardware upgrades. The company valuation crossed $100 million on its 5th anniversary. Business magazines began featuring profiles of Emma Williams Chen, highlighting both her innovative technology and her unusual path to success. From waitress to tech pioneer, read one headline, accompanying a photo of Emma in the Ascension lobby, elegant in a tailored suit that projected confidence without ostentation. The article detailed her journey from the Bronx to becoming one of the most promising women in the tech industry, though Emma had been careful to omit Jackson's role in her story, describing Noah's father only as no longer in the picture. At home, their success translated into a spacious Tribeca loft with floor-to-ceiling windows and room for Noah's increasingly complex science projects. David's investment in Ascension had multiplied many times over, but his pride in Emma's achievements far outweighed any financial gain. "You've built something extraordinary," he told her on the night they received news that Ascension had been valued at $500 million. "Not just the company, though that's remarkable, but the life you've created for Noah, for us." Their partnership strengthened as David's own career evolved. His background in technology and business ethics led him toward politics, first as an advisor on digital economy initiatives, then as a candidate for state office. Emma supported his ambitions wholeheartedly, recognizing in David the genuine commitment to public service that many politicians merely simulated. When Noah turned 10, Ascension Technologies opened international offices in Singapore and London. The company now employed over 800 people globally and had revolutionized energy consumption patterns for thousands of businesses. Emma had become a sought-after speaker at industry conferences, her practical approach to sustainability winning converts even among traditional industries resistant to change. It was at one such conference in San Francisco that the past unexpectedly intruded on Emma's carefully constructed new life. During a networking reception following her keynote address, she found herself face-to-face with Marcus Donovan, a former colleague of Jackson's she remembered from a dinner party years earlier. "Emma Williams!" Or I should say Williams Chen now, Marcus exclaimed, clearly surprised to see her in this context. "I almost didn't recognize you. Last time we met you were working as a waitress," Emma finished smoothly, extending her hand. "Life takes interesting turns." Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "Indeed, your company is doing remarkable things. We actually tried to implement something similar at Montgomery Properties recently, but it's been challenging." Emma maintained her professional smile, though her pulse quickened at the mention of Jackson's company. "Oh? How so?" "The old guard's resistance to change," Marcus sighed. "Jackson's father still controls most decisions, and he's suspicious of anything that wasn't around when he built the company. They're bleeding money trying to meet new sustainability regulations instead of adapting." The conversation moved to other topics, but that night in her hotel room, Emma found herself searching for news about Montgomery Properties. The company that had once seemed an unassailable empire now appeared vulnerable, with industry analyses noting its failure to modernize operations and adapt to changing environmental standards. A photo accompanying one article showed Jackson at a real estate conference, looking older and more strained than Emma remembered. His trademark confidence seemed diminished, his posture suggesting a man fighting to maintain his position rather than expanding his territory. Emma closed her laptop, surprised by her lack of satisfaction at this evidence of Jackson's struggles. The anger that had once fueled her determination had gradually transformed into something else. Not forgiveness, certainly, but a recognition that his cruelty had ultimately led her toward a life far richer than anything she might have had as Jackson Montgomery's reluctant partner. By the time Noah turned 13, Ascension Technologies had become a global powerhouse valued at nearly $3 billion. Emma and David had purchased a penthouse duplex in Tribeca with spectacular views of the city, while maintaining a commitment to giving back through educational initiatives focused on underprivileged youth. May, now in her 70s but still sharp-minded, accepted Emma's invitation to move into an apartment in their building, becoming the grandmother figure Noah adored. David's political career had advanced to the U.S. Senate, where his technology expertise made him a valuable voice on regulatory committees. Noah, already accepted to advanced placement programs at several prestigious universities, had developed an algorithm for water purification that promised to revolutionize access to clean water in developing regions. His mathematical genius had blossomed under his parents' guidance, his confidence stemming from the secure foundation they had provided. The New York Times wants to profile Noah for their Future Innovators series, Emma's communications director announced during a leadership meeting. They're calling him the youngest environmental technology pioneer in a generation. Emma's pride in her son was tempered only by protective instincts. "He's still a child," she reminded her team. "We shield him from excessive publicity." That evening, in the privacy of their home, Emma watched David helping Noah refine equations for his water purification project. Their heads bent together over the complex calculations, laughter occasionally punctuating their serious discussion. The scene embodied everything she had fought to create: a family built on respect, intellectual curiosity, and genuine love. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. Montgomery Properties announces strategic review amid declining market position. Emma silenced the notification without reading further. The past had lost its power to disrupt her present, reduced to occasional reminders of how far she had traveled from that rainy night when she'd been discarded like an inconvenient accessory. On the night that Ascension Technologies was officially valued at $1 billion, Emma bought herself an emerald necklace that shone almost as brightly as the satisfaction in her eyes. The same satisfaction that would one day illuminate her face when she finally stood face to face with the man who said she would never be enough. The emerald necklace became Emma's talisman, a physical reminder of how far she had come from that rain-soaked night when she'd clutched a $25,000 check and felt her world collapsing. Now, 5 years after purchasing that symbolic piece of jewelry, Emma Williams Chen stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her office on the 47th floor of Ascension Tower in Hudson Yards, watching Manhattan shimmer in the summer haze. At 40 years old, she commanded a view that once would have seemed impossible. The city that had nearly broken her now spread beneath her feet like a glittering tribute. "Mother, the investors from Singapore are on the line." Noah's voice broke through her reverie as he entered her office, carrying a folder of detailed spreadsheets he had prepared himself. At 14, he carried himself with the quiet confidence of someone much older, his tall frame and defined features making him appear closer to 17 than 14. Emma turned from the window, momentarily struck by how much her son resembled his biological father, the same penetrating eyes, the same determined set of his jaw. But unlike Jackson, Noah's intelligence was tempered with kindness, his brilliance with humility. "Tell them I'll return their call in 5 minutes," she replied, straightening her tailored blazer. "And Noah, remember you don't need to work during summer break. You should be with your friends." Noah smiled, revealing the dimple in his chin that was a perfect replica of Jackson's. "But I enjoy this," he said with genuine enthusiasm. "The Singapore project's carbon reduction metrics are fascinating." Emma watched her son with a mixture of pride and wonder. The mathematical prodigy who had been accepted to Harvard with a full scholarship, the youngest freshman in decades, could have spent his summer doing anything, yet he chose to immerse himself in Ascension's latest sustainability initiatives. The empire she had built from that small Brooklyn office now sprawled across 3 continents. Ascension Technologies, valued at $11.4 billion, employed over 3,000 people worldwide. Their energy optimization systems had evolved beyond commercial applications into smart city infrastructure, with governments from Singapore to Stockholm implementing their groundbreaking technologies. "Ms. Chen, your schedule for today is complete," her assistant announced from the doorway. "Board meeting at 2, platform launch at 4, and the Metropolitan Gala at 8. The Metropolitan Gala. Emma had completely forgotten. The annual event gathered New York's elite in a spectacle of power, wealth, and influence. As one of the museum's largest donors and a prominent figure in business circles, her presence was essential. "Inform my stylist I'll wear the green Valentino, and confirm David can leave the committee in time." As her team mobilized, Emma checked her phone for market updates. A notification caught her attention. Montgomery Properties announces restructuring after 30% drop in valuation. A subtle smile formed on her lips. The Montgomery real estate empire, once untouchable, had struggled for years due to its refusal to adapt to new sustainability demands. Precisely the field where Ascension Technologies dominated. In their Tribeca duplex that evening, Emma prepared for the night with the help of her staff. The Valentino emerald gown embraced her curves with elegant precision. Around her neck, the emerald necklace gleamed, the first significant luxury she had purchased for herself on the day Ascension surpassed $1 billion in market value. "You look stunning," David commented, adjusting his tie. At 52, Senator Chen maintained a distinguished presence, with salt and pepper hair at his temples and an athletic build maintained despite his demanding schedule. "Is Noah almost ready?" Emma asked, checking her reflection one final time. "Yes, finishing with his bow tie. He insisted on attending. I think he's excited because Harvard's Applied Mathematics Department chair will be there." Emma smiled with pride. Her son, so brilliant, so determined, so much like her. "You know you don't have to drag me to these boring events," Noah joked, entering the room. Tall for his age, with defined features and penetrating eyes, he appeared older than his 14 years. "Boring? This is the social event of the year, young man. Besides, you're the only teenager on the planet who considers a benefit gala boring compared to proving mathematical theorems." David laughed. The trio entered the limousine heading toward the Metropolitan Museum. Emma gazed through the window, observing the city that had once nearly destroyed her, now the backdrop of her triumph. She had no idea that in a few hours the past she had left behind would finally catch up with her. As they approached the museum, Emma felt an unexpected flutter of anxiety. She had checked the guest list that morning out of habit, scanning for potential business connections, when a name had leaped from the screen: Jackson Montgomery, Montgomery Properties. She hadn't mentioned this discovery to David, though he knew the outline of her history with Jackson. Some wounds, even healed ones, retained their sensitivity. The limousine pulled up to the museum entrance where photographers clustered behind velvet ropes. Camera flashes exploded as they emerged, voices calling out, "Senator Chen! Mrs. Williams Chen! Over here!" Emma moved with practiced grace, her emerald gown catching the light as she posed briefly with David and Noah before proceeding up the grand staircase. The museum's entrance hall had been transformed into a wonderland of light and art, this year's theme American Renaissance, celebrating the new pioneers reshaping society through innovation. "Emma, darling, how marvelous to see you." The museum director approached, kissing her on both cheeks. "Your donation made the entire Sustainable Technologies wing possible. We must photograph you there later." "It would be my pleasure, Victoria. Have you met my son, Noah? The young genius. Of course, your water purification algorithm is the talk of scientific circles." Noah blushed slightly, always uncomfortable with praise despite deserving it. His algorithm had reduced energy consumption for water purification by 40%. An innovation several corporations had offered fortunes to acquire. "I'll get champagne for us," David offered, moving toward the bar. It happened then. Emma turned to observe a digital sculpture when her eyes met a face she hadn't seen in 15 years, but that occasionally haunted her dreams. Jackson Montgomery stood less than 30 feet away, conversing with a group of investors. At 48, he maintained his aristocratic appearance, though his temples now displayed silver streaks and lines of worry marked his face. He wore an impeccable tuxedo, but his eyes betrayed the tension of someone facing financial problems. The moment he noticed her was almost cinematic. The conversation on his lips died suddenly, and his face paled as if he'd seen a ghost. In a sense, he had. The ghost of what might have been, of what he had thrown away. Emma remained impassive, though her heart raced. 15 years of unconscious preparation for this moment, and still, she hadn't expected the wave of conflicting emotions that flooded her. "Mom, are you okay?" Noah asked, noticing her sudden rigidity. It was enough for Jackson to shift his gaze from Emma to the teenager at her side. The resemblance was undeniable. The same intense eyes, the same bearing, the same dimple in the chin. Jackson's blood seemed to freeze in his veins as he mentally calculated. "I'm fine, sweetheart," Emma replied, instantly recomposing herself. "I just recognized someone from the past." Before Noah could inquire further, they were approached by the chairman of Harvard's mathematics department, eager to discuss the young man's revolutionary algorithm. For the next hour, Emma navigated the gala with deliberate indifference to Jackson's presence, though she remained acutely aware of his every movement. She noticed how he observed her from a distance, how his eyes followed Noah with a mixture of shock and fascination. It was during dinner that the inevitable occurred. The organizers, unaware of their shared history, had placed Montgomery Properties and Ascension Technologies at adjacent tables as representatives of old and new power in New York. "Senator Chen, a pleasure to finally meet you," Jackson approached during the seating change for the main address, extending his hand to David, who shook it cordially, unaware of this man's significance. "Likewise, Mr. Montgomery, your family has a long history in this city." "And you must be Emma." Jackson turned, as if they were meeting for the first time. "Your reputation in the energy sector is impressive." Emma held his gaze with icy calm. "Montgomery, it's been a while." David immediately caught the tension, observing his wife's face. "You know each other?" he asked cautiously. "Superficially," Emma answered. "Many years ago." "Actually," Jackson interrupted, his gaze shifting to Noah, who was absorbed in conversation with a famous physicist a few yards away, "I believe our acquaintance was more profound than that." Emma felt her blood boil but maintained her composure. "David, darling, could you check if the energy secretary has arrived? He wanted to discuss the Clearwater project implementation before the speech." Understanding his wife needed privacy, David nodded and moved away, though not without casting a concerned glance. "What do you want, Jackson?" Emma asked once they were alone, her voice low but sharp as a blade. "He's my son, isn't he?" Jackson asked, looking directly at Noah. While the limousine approached the Metropolitan Museum, Emma touched the emerald necklace at her throat instinctively, not as a protection talisman, but as a reminder of the power she now possessed to show Jackson Montgomery that the waitress from the Bronx had become greater than the man who had discarded her as insignificant. Biologically speaking, yes. In every other aspect that matters, no. Emma's words cut through the air between them, precise and cold. Jackson's eyes widened slightly, confirmation of what he'd already suspected from the moment he saw Noah. "Why did you never reach out? To tell me you had him?" Jackson asked, his voice lower now, eyes darting to ensure they weren't overheard. Emma nearly laughed. "You have an impressive selective memory. People like you are merely stepping stones for men like me." "Remember those words?" Jackson's face contorted with a mixture of shame and regret. "I was young, arrogant, scared. And I was young, pregnant, and completely alone," Emma responded, her voice steady despite the emotions churning beneath her composed exterior. "But here we are. The waitress from the Bronx is worth billions, while the Montgomery empire is begging for investors to stay afloat. Ironic, isn't it? The color drained from Jackson's face. How did you— Wall Street Journal, finance section. Your company has been selling off parts for months, trying to avoid bankruptcy, from what I understand. At that moment, Noah approached, unaware of the drama unfolding. Mom, Dr. Goldstein wants to introduce me to the Nobel Committee. May I join his table? Emma smiled affectionately. Of course, sweetheart. I'll be there in a minute. Jackson stared fixedly at the teenager, unable to disguise his shock at the presence of the son he never knew. Mr. Montgomery, I presume? Noah extended his hand politely, having no idea who he was greeting. Noah Williams Chen. I read about your urban revitalization proposal in Architecture Today. Fascinating approach, though your sustainability model needs serious adjustments. Jackson shook his son's hand mechanically, stunned by the casual way the young man offered critique of his work. You have an interest in architecture? Among other things. Applied mathematics is my specialty. Actually, your company tried to purchase my water purification algorithm last month, but it ended up with my mother's company. Emma observed with satisfaction the exact moment comprehension hit Jackson. The revolutionary algorithm that could save Montgomery properties from technological obsolescence had been created by the son he had rejected. Noah, why don't you join Dr. Goldstein? Don't keep him waiting, Emma suggested gently. As soon as Noah moved away, Jackson turned to her, devastated. He doesn't know who I am. He knows he has a biological father who isn't part of his life. The details were never relevant. Emma, please, I have the right to— Rights? Emma's tone hardened instantly. You abdicated any rights when you kicked me out of your apartment with a $25,000 check and treated me like a disposable inconvenience. At that moment, a Wall Street Journal photographer approached. Mrs. Williams Chen, Mr. Montgomery, may we capture this historic moment? The clean energy pioneer and the traditional real estate magnate finally talking. Before Jackson could protest, Emma smiled radiantly for the camera. Of course. Mr. Montgomery was just commenting how his company could have benefited from our technologies years ago. Perhaps if he had recognized the value of what was right in front of him, things might be different today. The flash fired, capturing Emma's triumphant smile and Jackson's defeated expression in a photo that would grace the front page of the business section the following day. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of strategic avoidance. Emma rejoined David, who squeezed her hand questioningly. That was him, wasn't it? He whispered as they applauded a speech about innovation. Emma nodded slightly. History approaching with hat in hand. I'll tell you everything later. Across the room, Jackson Montgomery stood isolated despite being surrounded by people. Emma noticed how differently others interacted with him now compared to 15 years ago. Where once there had been deference and eagerness, now there were shorter conversations, quicker exits, the subtle dance of power shifting away. When the gala concluded, Emma and David collected Noah, who was energized by his conversation with the Nobel Committee. They're considering my algorithm for the Environmental Impact Prize track, he explained excitedly as they descended the museum steps. Dr. Goldstein says it could revolutionize water access in drought-affected regions. As they reached the bottom of the stairs, Jackson appeared at the periphery of Emma's vision, watching the family with undisguised longing. Their eyes met briefly, his pleading, hers impassive. In the limousine heading home, Noah fell asleep against David's shoulder, exhausted from the excitement. Emma gazed out the window, processing the encounter that had been 15 years in the making. Are you okay? David asked quietly, reaching for her hand. Better than okay, Emma replied, surprising herself with the truth of it. I thought seeing him would reopen old wounds, but instead, it felt like the final suture being placed. David studied her face in the passing streetlights. He looked shell-shocked when he saw Noah. Wouldn't you be? to suddenly see the brilliant son you discarded before he was even born, now poised to achieve more at 14 than you have in your entire career? The next morning arrived with the predicted media storm. The Wall Street Journal published the photo with the headline, "Titans in Collision, the Future Meets the Past at Met Gala," accompanied by a detailed analysis of how Ascension Technologies represented the new business model replacing traditional empires like Montgomery Properties. Emma scanned the article over breakfast, Noah already absorbed in complex equations at the dining table, oblivious to the significance of the photo featuring his mother and biological father. "The board meeting has been moved to 11, David mentioned, checking his phone. "Something about responding to increased media interest after last night." Emma nodded, unsurprised. The business world thrived on narratives, and the visual of the struggling old guard facing the triumphant new power was too compelling to ignore. By midday, the New York Times had published a full-page feature on Noah Williams Chen, the mathematical prodigy accepted to Harvard at 14, highlighting his revolutionary algorithm and the fact that he had been raised exclusively by his mother, the visionary Emma Williams Chen, who built a technological empire while single-handedly raising an exceptional son. The irony wasn't lost on Emma. Jackson's rejection had fueled a determination that created precisely what would have most impressed his world, success on a scale that made even the Montgomery name seem small by comparison. 3 days later, the true bombshell exploded. A second-tier tabloid managed to connect the dots between the tense encounter at the gala, Noah's age, and Jackson's brief relationship with an unknown waitress 15 years earlier. The sensationalist headline asked, "Secret heir? The prodigy son, the real estate magnate never acknowledged?" Emma's phone rang incessantly that day, journalists seeking comments, business associates expressing concern, friends offering support. She instructed her communications team to issue a simple statement. Ms. Williams Chen's personal life remains private. Her focus continues to be Ascension's mission of creating sustainable technology solutions and supporting her son's development. That evening, David returned home with news that Jackson's wife, Alexandra, had been seen leaving their Upper East Side home with their 2 young daughters, luggage in tow. The rumor in political circles is that she confronted him about the tabloid story and didn't like his answers, David said, loosening his tie. "She's apparently taken the girls to their Connecticut house." Emma absorbed this information with unexpected empathy. Those girls are innocent in all this. They're Noah's half-sisters. "Do you want to tell him?" David asked, nodding toward Noah's room where their son was video conferencing with researchers from MIT. "Not yet," Emma decided. "There's already too much attention on him. Let's wait until the media cycle moves on." But the cycle didn't move on. The story of the brilliant son rejected before birth by a once powerful real estate scion, only to eclipse his father's achievements before puberty, proved irresistible to the public. Within a week, it had evolved from business gossip to social commentary on privilege, meritocracy, and poetic justice. While the flash of the camera captured her triumphant smile and Jackson's defeated expression in a photo that would grace the front page of the business section the following day, Emma couldn't imagine that the true conclusion to this 15-year story was yet to come, when that photo and its implications would reach every executive desk and cell phone screen in Manhattan. The morning after the Metropolitan Gala was brutal for Jackson Montgomery. Opening the Wall Street Journal over his untouched breakfast, he stared at the photo dominating the business section. There he was, looking shell-shocked beside a triumphant Emma, the headline mocking him, "Titans in Collision, the Future Meets the Past at Met Gala." The accompanying analysis detailed how Ascension Technologies represented the new business paradigm replacing outdated empires like Montgomery Properties. Alexandra hadn't come down for breakfast. She hadn't spoken to him since yesterday when the tabloid had hit their doorstep with its screaming headline about a secret heir. Jackson had heard her packing in their bedroom as he pretended to work in his study, unable to face her questions or, worse, her silence. His phone hadn't stopped ringing, concerned board members, nervous investors, his father demanding an explanation for this public relations disaster. Jackson ignored them all, staring instead at the New York Times article about Noah Williams Chen, the mathematical prodigy whose water purification algorithm could revolutionize access to clean water worldwide. The teenager's eyes, his eyes, stared back at him from the page, alongside a glowing profile of Emma as a visionary who built a technological empire while single-handedly raising an exceptional son. Is it true? Alexandra's voice cut through his thoughts. She stood in the doorway, elegant even in distress, their two daughters' suitcases visible in the hallway behind her. Alex, I can explain. Just tell me, do you have a 14-year-old son you never mentioned? The silence stretched between them. Answer enough. The girls and I will be in Connecticut, she said finally. Don't call until you've decided what kind of man you actually are. Jackson sat alone in his office at Montgomery Tower, watching rain streak down the windows, obscuring the city his family had helped build. 15 years ago, he'd discarded Emma and their unborn child with casual cruelty, secure in his position, certain of his trajectory. Now his company was struggling, his marriage in jeopardy, and the son he'd never known was already more accomplished than he'd been at twice the age. After 3 days of increasingly desperate calls from investors and declining stock values, Jackson made a decision. Without an appointment, he arrived at Ascension Tower, a gleaming monument to sustainable innovation that seemed to mock the aging Montgomery buildings nearby. Mr. Montgomery to see Mrs. Williams Chen, he told the receptionist, who regarded him with the polite wariness reserved for unexpected visitors. Mrs. Williams Chen isn't accepting unscheduled appointments, she replied, recognition dawning in her eyes. The tabloid stories had made his face familiar even to those who wouldn't normally recognize real estate executives. Tell her it's about her son, Jackson said, the words unfeeling foreign on his tongue. Our son. 5 minutes later, he was escorted to the 47th floor, where Emma's assistant met him with cool professionalism. Mrs. Williams Chen can give you 5 minutes, she said, leading him to an expansive office with floor-to-ceiling windows showcasing the Manhattan skyline. Emma stood behind her desk, the emerald necklace at her throat catching the afternoon light. 5 minutes, Montgomery. That's all you have, she said coldly when he entered. You planned all this, he accused, unable to contain the words that had festered for days. The exposure, the public humiliation. Emma rose from her chair, impressive in her navy blue suit. I planned nothing. Unlike you, I don't manipulate people. Fate has an interesting sense of humor, that's all. Alexandra left me, took the girls. The words emerged more vulnerable than he'd intended. And that should matter to me because now Noah has 2 half-sisters he'll never know. The mention of Jackson's daughters made Emma pause briefly. That was low, even for you. Emma, I'm begging, let me meet him. Not as a father if you don't want, but somehow. He's brilliant, extraordinary. Yes, he is. Despite you, not because of you. Jackson pulled an envelope from his pocket. I'm transferring 25% of Montgomery Properties shares to his name. It's legally his, regardless of what you decide. Emma took the envelope and, without opening it, tore it in half. Noah doesn't need your declining shares. At 18, he'll have his own $50 million trust fund that I built for him, and unlike your assets, ours aren't sinking. Defeated, Jackson collapsed into a chair. What happened to you, Emma? You used to have compassion. I had to set it aside when I was working 3 jobs, pregnant and alone, she answered, though her tone was less sharp. You know what's most ironic, Jackson? If you had stood by me, you would have benefited from all this. Ascension could have saved Montgomery Properties years ago. The silence that followed was deafening. May I ask one thing? Jackson finally spoke. Is he happy? The question caught Emma off guard. For a moment, the mask of the ruthless CEO gave way to the proud mother. Very. He has an extraordinary mind, a kind heart, and is unconditionally loved. And David, is he a good father? The best Noah could have. Present at every game, every science fair, every nightmare. He's the father who shows up, Jackson, who chooses to be present every day. Jackson nodded slowly, the full reality of everything he had lost finally hitting him with full force. Tell him I'm sorry. Not now, not for me. But someday when you think it's appropriate, tell him his biological father made the biggest mistake of his life and deeply regrets it. Rising to leave, Jackson paused at the door. You did it, Emma. Built something greater than I could ever have imagined. You proved me wrong about everything. After he left, Emma remained motionless for long minutes, absorbing the closure of a cycle that had defined so many years of her life. There was no vindictive satisfaction, only a sense of final liberation. That evening, in their Tribeca apartment, Emma watched David helping Noah with an advanced calculus problem. The genuine laughter between them filled the space with an intimacy no fortune could purchase. Her phone vibrated with a notification. Montgomery Properties announces complete restructuring. Jackson Montgomery resigns as CEO. Emma turned off the phone without reading further. The past was finally closed. Mom, Noah called from the dining table. Can we talk about that summer program at CERN? David thinks I should go. Of course you should, she smiled, joining her real family. The world is waiting to see what you'll do next. Meanwhile, across town, Jackson Montgomery watched Manhattan's lights alone from his empty penthouse, holding the Metropolitan Gala photograph where Emma, radiant and powerful, looked directly at the camera while he gazed with belated admiration at the son he would never know. In the shadows of his declining empire, Jackson finally understood the most expensive lesson of his life. Some choices cannot be reversed, and some people aren't stepping stones. They are the very staircase that leads to heaven. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.